Okay, hi everyone. Second part of today's lesson. I'll try and keep this one a little bit shorter. This video is about an overview of the first unit of work, and we are starting that first unit of work today. Now, on the screen, which I'll just focus on for a second, you'll see that I'm looking at a different PDF this time. So if you haven't downloaded this, jump on the blog. That's profpoet.wordpress.com. And this is, I think, the second file down. This is the Reading Practices Handout 2016. And in this handout are all of the resources that you will need for the first 6 weeks of work and all of the holiday homework. There's also a file which is the texts, the collection of texts. So all the short stories, the poetry, and so on in that one collection, and you'll need that as well, but you won't need that today. You'll need that over the holidays. You won't need that actually during Headstart. We won't be using the texts in that collection during Headstart. The texts are either a separate PDF, which we'll be looking at as a picture book, or they're actually contained in this handout itself. So if you haven't downloaded that, pause this, download it now, but I'll also have it on the screen so that you don't have to be flicking backwards and forwards. Okay, hopefully you've got that. And as I said, I'll have this on the screen so you can be following along on the screen behind me. I know it's not ideal, but hopefully it's enough to get us there. So just to look at, this is the way I run my units. So if you get familiar with this in this first unit of work, and it might be an adjustment for some of you to the way you're used to your English teacher, say, running the program. It won't be that hard for students that have had me before, because this is the way that I ran the program in Year 9, but otherwise you'll need to get used to it. I give everything that you're going to be doing on the first day. The first day of the unit, you get everything. You get everything except for the material that's relevant to the SACs, that's sensitive to time release. So obviously I'm not going to give you the unseen text that you're going to be writing an essay on at the end of this unit. I'm not going to give you the prompts for the essays that we'll be writing in this unit. But everything else is there. This means if your family goes on a holiday, you can take the work with you and do on the beach in Tahiti, which is what I would expect you to do, of course. Or if you're unexpectedly away, you're sick or something like that, often students do email through, and I still encourage you to do that and say, just checking what we're doing today, if there's anything that I can catch up on or need to do. You can know what that's going to be, and it's particularly useful for people that know they're going to be absent, they've got a family wedding or they've got a dentist appointment or something like that. They can get a little bit ahead. It's also, these handouts are designed so that you can organise your time. VC is a great balancing act, and you're going to find that sometimes you're going to have 2 or 3 SACs in a week. And I, not that I don't care, but I'm not sympathetic, and I won't adjust for that. You'll know that ahead of time, and you can adjust the way that you're studying, you can adjust the way that you're doing your preparation to accommodate those things using this material. Certainly expect you to make some mistakes and make some stumbles, but I expect you to address those when they're pointed out to you as well. So the first unit of work is reading practices. As you can see, we start in Headstart and it goes through to week 6 of term 1. So it's a good long unit. It's the underpinning skills of literature, though. And we take you from how you read now to how you need to read in literature, and you'll be somewhat dropped in the deep end and need to learn how to swim. And then what we'll do gradually over the course of the year is really refine to continue the metaphor. We'll refine the strokes. So you might be madly scrambling for the first 6 weeks and over the holidays, and gradually you'll become that the gracious and the elegant swimmer in the pool. I'm going to stop that analogy now because I don't know how to continue it. At the front of the handout, I usually list the texts. In this case, there's a number of texts that we'll be doing, and there's a number that we'll be doing in Headstart, and there's a number that we'll be doing during the unit, and you can see them listed here. I am providing all of these texts to you. Okay, some little pictures of the Anthony Brown and the Hans Christian Andersen story there. A picture of a nightingale from the John Keats poem, Ode to a Nightingale. And I also give an indication of the assessment. So even though that original document that I went through in the last video gave an overview, this one just gives the specific details of the assessments that are relevant to this unit. So in this first unit, you can see there is a reading journal, which I talked to you about last time, and I'll go through in a bit more detail in a moment. That's worth 20%. All the other reading journals throughout the year, the 3 other units have a reading journal as well, but they're only worth 10%. So they're really just a training tool to train you to do all the preparation and all of the practice that you need to do. They're to acknowledge that work as well. You'll still do all of that work in Year 12, but it's not marked. Only the SACs are marked in Year 12. In this unit, there are 2 SACs. There's one on a piece of poetry, which I'll help you with beforehand, and then there's one on a short story. I'm not going to tell you who that short story is by. I'll tell you that it is an Australian short story written in the last 30 years, but that is all I'm telling you. It's not one that I've taught before, so don't bother asking any of the previous students because obviously it's a new course, and I thought it'd be tricky because I often do reuse SACs, but in this case I'm not. Those are both worth 15%. So in fact, look at that. The journal in this case is the most heavily weighted assessment task. The 2 essays combined make up 30%. That means that this outcome overall is worth 50%. So the 2 outcomes in Unit 1 are worth the same amount. 3 assessment tasks here though. The 2 close reading tasks are done in class time. You'll have 2 periods for each of them. Okay, so that's the front cover. The second page looks like this, and I can't fit it all on the screen so that you can see it all at once, but you can review this on your iPad. You can print this out if you want, but I don't design the handouts to necessarily be printed out. Occasionally there'll be some printed material, but I'll usually print it for you if we need to annotate it or there's a table to fill in or something like that. So where the course overview had the week by week outline, this one actually has the lesson by lesson. Now, I didn't know at the time what the dates would be for our Headstart program, so you can see it just has lesson 1, 2, 3. So we're doing lesson 1 today, course overview and introductions. And we're not really doing the introductions. I guess you're getting to know me, but I'm not getting to know you anyway. But we're really just doing the course overview, the whole course, and then this first outcome. Next lesson on Thursday, we'll do How We Read, and we'll look at Anthony Brown. But I'm going to try and start that today so that we get a bit more time to perhaps review some of those questions and things, and that will be the next video. Then we'll look at Auden on Friday. So that will be a really important lesson, and that's a poem that I probably wouldn't expect you to tackle on your own at all. And so we'll go through that. I'll most likely podcast the lesson as well, so I'll record the lesson as we talk, and you can go back and listen to that in the holidays if you feel that you missed something, that it was all too much to take in at one time. And I think we actually have the last lesson of the day nearly, so you might be a bit brain dead by that stage of Headstart. You can see over at the side over here, this column here is the journal checklist. So what you'll see in this column is an indication of what tasks will be completed in amongst those lessons that will contribute to your journal. You will have an indication of how many marks that's worth. The journal is worth 100 marks. So the work that you'll do on Auden is worth 15 of those marks. Now I'm currently working on assessment rubrics for those, and by the end of the week I'll have them done, and you'll know how you're going to be assessed on that task before you complete it. And we'll probably go through that in class. You can see then that there's an indication of what you'll be doing in your holiday homework, just a summary of the instructions that were further into this handout, a summary of the summary that was in the previous handout, and you can see that the short texts and close analysis activities are worth 25 of those 100 marks. So 15 and 25 together, that's 40 marks. So 40% of your journal, which is worth 20% of your semester result, is already done before you come back from your holidays. So I need you to just take a moment and think that through. I'm treating the holiday homework very seriously. It's not possible to do all the work that we need to do in class. I'd love it to be the case. I'd love you to be able to go and dance in a meadow when you got home from school each day, but it's not the reality that we're faced with. VCE is a competition against the rest of the state, and I'm here to tell you that I will only get you to do the work that I absolutely think is vital to maintain that competitive edge with the other schools that you'll be competing for the university places against. And the work that I'll give you will give you that competitive edge, provided you do it, and provided you reflect upon the feedback. So, holiday homework, really important. When you come back, you can see that the date of the lesson is here. What we'll be doing that day is here, and these subheadings, or these indications here, these outlines here, line up with subheadings in the rest of the handout. This is about a 20-25 page document. And over the course of these 2 weeks, you'll see that the box over here is these 6 lessons. You'll complete this aspect of the journal. And so in a sense, this is an indication of your homework. Sometimes I'll indicate discrete homework tasks. Within this unit, I'm actually trying to do as much as we can in class, and homework will largely be finishing things off that we don't get through. It won't be more than 2 hours a week. I'll be very careful and modify expectations if I feel like we're going over that. But it'll give you an indication of when that will be due. So for instance, you can see that these dates go 2nd, 3rd, 5th of Feb, 10th, 11th, 12th of Feb. That's 2 weeks of classes, the 2-week rotation. Swimming sports is in the middle. So in fact, we have 5 lessons in that time. Across those 5 lessons, you can see the 5 things that we'll do. At the end of those 5 lessons, you will have completed this journal task. And when you see this here, this will be due on the following lesson. So you go down from this box here and along the column, and we see that that will be due on Tuesday, the 16th of February. Okay, I'll go through this again in class, and if it's not clear, please ask. So the due date is not written here. The due date is the next lesson that we have that I see you, and it's usually the start of the following week. Usually, not always. So that's how you use this document. It's a planner. You need to have a plan. You need to have a routine in VCE, and you'll certainly struggle if you're not, and you'll be trying to complete work the night before it's due rather than being a little bit more strategic with it. So try and use this document to maintain that strategy. I won't go through what each of these tasks involves, but suffice to say, we'll be looking at a short story by Hans Christian Andersen, a children's fairy tale called The Tinderbox. We'll then move into looking at some poetry. Ode to a Nightingale by John Keats is a classic. The Ballad of the Mermaids and the Drunks by Pablo Neruda, who's a Spanish poet, is a more contemporary piece. We'll then do our SAC. And you can see there's 3 lessons here. In the first lesson, I will be going through it with you. In the second and third lesson, you'll be doing it on your own. I'll give you some guidance to what I expect you to do, obviously, and we will have done a practice with the other 2, but it will be largely up to you. It will be a slightly open book SAC, this one. You'll be able to use your iPad to do some research and that sort of thing, but we will have gone through the poem and you'll have access to those notes. After that, we come back and we look at a short story by, I've forgotten the name of the author now. That's terrible. I love him too. No, I've lost it, and I'm not going to pause and Google or anything like that. Anyway, we're doing Hills Like White Elephants, which is an excellent short story. Very confusing short story, but an excellent short story, and you'll certainly really like it. And then we'll model how to do an essay with that one, and then you'll do essentially the same task that we'll do on Hills Like White Elephants on an unseen story, which, as I said, is by an Australian author. It's written in the last 30 years, but that's all I'm telling you. And I won't help you with that story at all. I've chosen something that I believe by that stage, if you've done the practice, if you've reflected on the feedback that you've been given, that will be more than able to be done without my help. The ideas in it are obvious. The techniques in it are obvious. You'll be able to deconstruct it and work it by that stage on your own. It won't be open book. All you'll have will be the text in front of you and time to analyse, deconstruct and write an essay. Okay, you'll have a prompt, but that will be about it. And so that will bring us to the end of the unit. So those dates for the assessment tasks are set, and they'll be in our system, they'll be in our calendar, and you can put them in your diary if you like, and know that you've got assessment tasks on those days. So if you happen to have a maths test the same day, know that ahead of time, and make sure you can plan your study to meet those 2 deadlines. Okay, in this unit, there's a lot of details because it's the first time that we're working together for most of us. There's a lot of instructions and a lot of expectations being outlined for the assessment. So as I say, I spend a lot of time here talking about the journal. I'm not going to read through this and go through this over and over and over again with you. You can read this, and this is perfectly self-explanatory on its own. So as I said, the journal is worth 100 marks. Each task is marked. Each task has a rubric, has a little criteria sheet, and you'll get comments and feedback on the work, annotation on the work itself, and perhaps some summative comments at the end, suggestions of what to do differently, and I'll be asking you to reflect on that too. And they'll all add up to 100 marks in the end, and that will be worth 20% of your semester result. All that you will get is a letter grade. You won't know how many points out of 100 you've scored, or how many percentage out of that 20 you scored. You'll get a letter grade, A+ for most of you, I would hope. So you can see that there's a checklist here to help you out. There's a checklist obviously in that table at the start, but there's a checklist here all in one place so you can see which tasks add up the most. What task is worth the most on its own? The holiday homework. The essays, as I said, there's 2 essays, and you can see what the expectation is here, and actually you can see what the criteria is. And again, I'm just finishing off the criteria, adjusting it for the new study design, making sure it's fair, making sure it's understandable by everyone, including me and you, and they'll go up on the blog hopefully before the end of the week, so you can actually see in detail what the assessment will be and how you'll be assessed and what the expectations are. I mark on a 5-point scale from well above standard through to below standard, and most of you will start by hitting the middle band, which is at standard, which is what we would expect most students to achieve or be able to achieve at year 11 at this point. I'll let you know that an at standard mark for every criteria will get you a C or a C+. A C or a C+ means that you are working at the expected level. So not everyone will get an A or an A+, and you might be used to being an A or an A+ student, and often what students do find is that in literature, sometimes they don't achieve that immediately, but we can get you there. And as I said, the journal is a really good place to bulk up that mark. Most students perform better in the journal than they do in the assessment tasks, in the SACs, and that can balance out that learning curve a little bit. So then we get, after those initial instructional pages, we get into the body of the unit. As I said, there's no additional handouts. Everything you need for the unit is here. You could do this course by distance ed. If you broke a leg and were in traction because you'd gone off skiing in the Swiss Alps, and you could do this course lying in your hospital bed. Hopefully it doesn't come to that. That's a bit grim, isn't it? I shouldn't have said that. But the point is that everything is there. There's no surprises, and I very, very rarely change things once they've been set. Most of the time it's because I've taught it many, many times, and I have taught this unit lots of times. It's just been adjusted to meet that new study design. So I'm not going to go through it, but I'd encourage you to have a look down, have a look at the sorts of things that you're going to be asked to do, have a look at the sorts of tasks, the sorts of homework that I'm going to be setting. Sometimes I have stipulated that this is a homework task. It should take you this long. And all of those instructions are there. If you're looking on a PDF on your iPad, all of the activities that we're going to be doing are highlighted in blue. Some of the absolutely key lessons of literature are in yellow boxes. And my friend the worm here occasionally pops up and reminds you what literature is all about. So we're going to start today. I'm going to rush through this in sort of 5 minutes, but we're going to start today by looking at what literature is all about. How do we read? So just to remind ourselves, this is what I said in the last video, that literature is essentially more than just who did what, why they did it, and what we think about that. That's what English was. We need to think about what the text is representing, the deeper meaning, or suggesting the ideas and the values within it. We need to think about what they're representing and suggesting about humanity, those bigger ideas, humanity, the human condition, so the society that we live in, or philosophical things. What does it mean to be? You know, those sorts of things. We need to question how, and how is a really big term in literature, and I write that a lot of the time on your work. How do you know this? How do you know that the text is doing that? Question how the way in which the text is presented to us leads us and others to construct particular meaning. So how does the text lead us to think what we think? How is that author manipulating us? Or how is our life experience informing the way that we're viewing what the author has written? To do this, we need to look at the words on the page. We analyze the text, not the author's life. Sometimes it's useful to know that, to understand how we might read it differently than intended, but we look at the words on the page. We become experts in interpreting that suggested meaning in all the possible ways that the text could be read, because I will read a text differently to you, and each of you will read the text differently to each other, and we need to understand that that's okay, that those readings, provided that they can be justified through textual evidence, are most likely all valid. Sometimes you'll be wrong, and sometimes I'll be wrong. But more often than not, if we can back it up with some suggestion of how the text is doing that and evidence to show, then we'll say, yeah, that's valid. That's valid and interesting. And you will be the 8th group that I've taught The Great Gatsby to. And the 7th group that I taught The Great Gatsby to said some things that I had never thought of before and were really, really interesting. So it does happen. Okay, so what we're actually going to do is try and practice this idea of deconstructing a text, of looking at a text, moving beyond reading for enjoyment and moving into that analysis space, understanding how that meaning has been constructed, what the author is doing to lead us down a certain path, and what we can draw out of it and connect to our own lives and connect to those ideas that we're meant to try and think about. And we're going to do that with a text called Anthony Brown's Voices in the Park. You might have read some Anthony Brown when you were a child. Willie the Wimp is a fantastic book. He often constructs, an English author that constructs amazing illustrations where all the characters are gorillas. Some of you might have looked at Anthony Brown before and seen things like, there's a great story called Gorilla, where a little girl gets a gorilla as a birthday present and it turns into a real gorilla. Or as I said, Willie the Chimp, who's Willie the Wizard, Willie the Superstar, Willie's Art Gallery. There's a whole series of them. A magical author illustrator. And we're going to look at one of his stories, and that's actually going to be the next video. But when we look at that, and this is just a screenshot here, we need to think about some of the things that are listed here in this this document. So we want to look at the use of symbolism and imagery. Anthony Brown is a surrealist artist. He uses quite a lot of very surreal images. We want to look at the language. We want to look at the color and tone. We want to look at allusions or other references to other texts. And we're going to really delve deep into this. So I'm going to do the next video. I'm going to read it to you, and then we might look at just the first little bit, and then we'll continue that in class. That'll be the next video. So perhaps pause this, look back on the work that we've talked through, look at that document, make sure you understand it. And again, if you have questions, jot them down, email them to me, and we'll try and resolve those in our first lesson face to face together.